So you guys smashed the like target in part 1 of today's video, so let's get into part 2 and rank some more championship strikers. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. Very excited to get into this one. If you've not seen part 1, make sure to go ahead and check it out. We picked out one striker from every championship club and I put them into a tier list based on how many goals I realistically see them scoring this season. In today's video, we're going to be picking out a second striker from your club and putting them into the tier list as well. As always, if you could hit 400 likes on today's video, that would be massively appreciated. But without any further ado, let's jump into this one. So as you can see on screen now, guys, this is the tier list and these are the players who we're going to be ranking in today's video. So I've gone ahead and picked out another striker that we didn't pick last time from each championship club, and I've also altered each of the tiers a little bit. I've scaled it down for this video as the majority of players that we're going to be picking from in today's video are sort of like the B sort of strikers, really the secondary choice and things like that, so we're not maybe expecting as many goals as some of the other ones that we ranked last time, but I think we got a decent selection here of all of these guys. So let me know down below, how many goals do you realistically see the players scoring this season from your club that we're going to be ranking. And we're going to start it out with Rodrigo Munoz of Fulham. Obviously quite an exciting transfer that went through this summer. Middlesbrough were also chasing him. It was quite a transfer saga in the end, but Fulham did get this one over the line. Now, he's had 2 appearances off the bench so far this season for Fulham, has scored 1 goal, and honestly, where I place him into this list really depends on how much game time he's actually going to get this season, because I think we all know that Mitrovic is going to be the main guy throughout the season. I'm tempted at the moment to go in and around 7 to 9 goals. I feel like that's a pretty safe bet. Next up, let's go for Huddersfield Town's Danny Ward. He's already matched his goal tally from last season, actually. He only scored 1 goal in the Championship for Huddersfield last season, and he's matched that already. Honestly, I think he probably fits into the 4 to 6 goal category. I think that the majority of Huddersfield's goals this season probably going to come from those wide areas, really, and Ward will, probably chip in with around 4 to 6. Obviously they'll probably switch between him and Campbell throughout the season. Next up, let's go for Hull City's Keane Lewis-Potter. Now, I'm not sure I'd really class him as like an out-and-out striker, but I was between, either picking him for this video or it would have been Tom Eaves, and I wanted to talk about Keane Lewis-Potter really because I think that despite Hull's struggles, and especially in front of goal so far this season, I really think he has it in him to get into double figures. I think that if Hull are going to have any sort of hopes of survival this season, they're all going to be pinned on him. He was absolutely electric on the opening day of the season at Deepdale. He got a goal and an assist in that game. Obviously since then the goals have dried up a little bit, but he's already on 2. And all of Hull's attacking threats at the moment are coming through him. So if anyone's going to get into double figures in that Hull side, I think it could be him. Next up, let's go for Luton Town's Harry Cornick. Now, last season, it just wasn't quite happening for him in front of goal. I think he got 7 assists, but actually only went on to score 1 goal, which was quite the disappointing return, really, by the standards that he had set for himself the year before that. He's already managed to outscore himself from last season, and for an overall return this season for Cornick, obviously can either play as that central striker or up front. And between these 2 categories right here, I'll probably see him getting 6 or 7 goals this season. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and I'll go 7 to 9 for Harry Cornick, I think. Next up, let's go for one of Middlesbrough's new arrivals this summer, Andraz Sporar. Now, I mean, he had a great debut, didn't he? That game away at Nottingham Forest looks absolutely clinical going forward. It's not seemingly the best of environments though at the moment. Middlesbrough in general, they haven't been great in front of goal so far. 9 championship games, just 9 goals for them so far. In terms of individual quality, he definitely has it in him to be scoring double figures, but I mean, Middlesbrough over recent years hasn't been a great sort of breathing ground for prolific strikers, has it? Assombalonga was always quite hot and cold over the years. Ashley Fletcher, it never quite clicked. Akpom started out really well last season, but he faded as the season went on. I think a safe bet for his first season in England would probably be 7 to 9 goals if it was a good season. I could see him getting double figures if things were to click for him, but at the moment, yeah, I'm between them two, between 9 and 10 for him at the moment. I'll play it safe for the time being, but I may change that later on in the video. Next up for Tom Bradshaw, yet to get off the mark so far this season for Millwall, but quite unfortunately so, after he had that goal ruled out against Coventry due to an offside. But yeah, quite a dubious one, that one actually. Millwall, similar to Middlesbrough, their underlying numbers in terms of creating chances and stuff like that and goals scored hasn't been great in the Championship so far this season. This has been probably the biggest area where they've fallen down in recent years. There is a bit of rotation between the forwards that they'll play with as well. Obviously, Jed Wallace's place in the side is pretty cemented, but then you've got the likes of Smith, who scored the weekend, Bradshaw or Afobe now to play in that other role. So I'm going to go 4 to 6, I think, for Tom Bradshaw. I think in the right setup, he can still be quite a useful player at this level, but yeah, with the way that Millwall set up, it's not always the easiest to be prolific in front of goal. Lewis Grabban up next, who is a really interesting one. Is Steve Cooper going to be able to get the best out of Grabban? Because, I mean, last season was really poor by his standards. It took him absolutely ages to get off the mark, and he ultimately ended the season with just 6 goals, which was quite the fall off from last time around when he bagged 20 in the Championship. When it's between him and Taylor up front, I still think I'm probably leaning towards Grabban, to be honest with you. A safe bet would probably be 4 to 6 goals once again for Grabban, but I think I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If he does get a run in the side and Steve Cooper really gets them going this season, then I'll say 7 to 9 goals. But even by his standards, I'd still think that he'd be capable of a little bit better than that. Now, Jack Marriott was up next for Peterborough. When they actually made this tier list, so sort of imported all the players into this one, Marriott hadn't yet picked up his injury, obviously. He's since picked up a hamstring injury and is set to be out for the next sort of like 4 to 5 months of the season. Obviously, he struggled with injuries throughout his time at Derby, and that's hit him once again. He's got 1 goal in the Championship up until this point, but with that injury, I'm going to have to put him into that 0 to 3, probably not looking great for him at the moment. And in general, Peterborough, to be honest with you, their creative stats in front of goal still aren't looking great. They're averaging just 7.7 shots per 90, which is considerably the lowest in the Championship at the moment, and they're also leaking goals at the back. So yeah, I think 0 to 3 for Marriott just because of that injury. Next up then, let's go for Preston North End's Shawnee Maguire. Now, he is an interesting one because he has had a lot of football, to be fair, so far this season. I think that Frankie sees a bit of a partnership forming between him and Emile Reese. The one area, though, where Maguire really falls down is his record in front of goal. Over the last few seasons, really, he's not been that prolific forward that we thought he would be when we originally brought him in. I think he got 10 goals in his first season, but injuries have slowed him down a little bit. And to be fair to Maguire, he has adapted his game to whereby he is useful even when he's not chipping in with the goals. I think he probably ends the season with more assists than he does goals, to be honest with you. He did get a goal in the Cup the other week, but in terms of an output, it wouldn't surprise me 0 to 3, to be honest with you. After that, let's go for QPR's Andre Gray. Now, similar to what we said when we were ranking Lyndon Dykes for how many goals I thought he'd score in the last video, this one really is all dependent on how many minutes he actually gets. His goals to minutes ratio has been decent so far this season. I think he's only just played over 200 minutes and has already got 2 goals for QPR. Played 90 in that game against West Brom and obviously got the opener in that one. Warburton has quite a few options now with how he can set up QPR in an attacking aspect, obviously, whether they go with 2 strikers, you know, be it Dykes, Gray or Austin, or they opt to go with 1 striker and the 2 number 10s playing behind. There's goals to be had in this QPR squad, but I think they will be fairly well shared out. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, though, and I will back him to get into double figures this season. I'll go 10 to 13 for Andre Gray, which I think is around about fair. Next up, let's go for Carlton Morris from Barnsley. Now, not had all too much game time so far this season. He's only played 2 matches. Last season, he really made a name for himself, to be honest with you, as being that sort of great super sub. You know, his goals to minutes ratio was absolutely off the charts just because of how many times he'd come on off the bench and end up scoring. This season, though, I'm still pretty unsold on Barnsley. It looks like a bit of a project in the works. So I think for his goal output, I'll go for 4 to 6 this season. After that, we'll go for Reading's Lucas João. Shame about the injury, and to be honest with you, I feel a bit gutted for him because you'd imagine that he'd be licking his lips with this potential, you know, 3 that would be playing off him of Halilovic, Swift and Ajaria. I mean, there'd be serious goals to be had there for a player as good as Lucas João, but with that injury and him expected to be out until at least next year, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he can at least chip in with 4 to 6 goals when he gets back from that injury, but yeah, that's really going to hamper him this season, isn't it? Next up then, let's go for Ryan Brewster. Oh, I really don't know where to put him because he's yet to get off the mark in the Championship so far this season. Obviously, things at Sheffield United haven't really clicked for him so far, but I did see an interview that Jokanovic gave the other day, and that he is still, backing him to come good this season. And I back him to come good at some point, We all know, people who've watched this channel in the Championship over the last few years, how prolific he was at Swansea. He can do it at this level. It's been sort of tinkered with the idea of him playing sort of on the right-hand side, though, lately, instead of that sort of pivotal point up front, which Billy Sharp has taken up recently. It will just take a few games for him to score a couple of goals and really find his confidence, and from then he could absolutely explode. But when in the season is that going to come? Is that going to come like a month before the season ends, or is it going to come in the next few game weeks? I do see him scoring at least 7 goals this season. I do. It's whether he manages to get into double figures, because I do think that Sheffield United have a lot more about them now, especially with, Morgan Gibbs-White coming into the side. They look a lot more creative. I'm still going to back him to explode at some point and say he'll get into double figures, but yeah, a long way to go from there. From now on, it still seems. Sam Sturridge next up for Stoke City. Similar to Andre Gray at QPR, this one really depends on just how many minutes he actually gets up front for Stoke, because they have quite a few options now in that forward position, especially when Campbell gets back from his injury as well. That'll be another one to add into the mix when he's like properly back up fit and firing week in, week out. I do like Sturridge though, and he's got a decent sort of goals to minutes ratio from the amount of minutes he's played for Stoke so far this season, and should he get a run in the side, like I think he should, I think he's got in him to be getting into double figures this season, to be honest with you. I'll put him in the 10 to 13 category as well. Next up then to Swansea City's Michael Obafemi. Now, I'm a big fan of this deal actually. Preston were after him at one point, Blackburn Rovers as well. I think that Swansea have got quite a good deal actually here for the money they ended up paying for him. However, how many goals do I see him scoring this season? I think it's clear already that Joel Perreault will be sort of like the main guy for Swansea this season. And we ranked how many goals I thought he'd score in part 1, so make sure to go ahead and check that one out. I do think there is the potential for Obafemi and Perreault to sort of build up a bit of a partnership between themselves as the season goes on. I think we have already seen them both together on the pitch at the same time, but with Swansea not exactly being the most free scorers and Perreault taking up a lot of the goal scoring burden, I think for his first season it wouldn't surprise me if he's around 4 to 6. Once again, between these two categories really, depending on sort of the amount of minutes he ends up playing. I'll play it safe and go 4 to 6, but he could easily fall into that 7 to 9 category, especially if he does get up and going fairly swiftly. Next up then to Karlan Grant. Now, the last time he was at this level with Huddersfield, he scored 19 goals in the Championship. I think that Grant will be one of the players at West Brom who will probably benefit this season from them being relegated, to be honest with you. I think that the Premier League maybe came a bit too soon, especially in the circumstances that West Brom found themselves in last season. He bagged a couple of goals in their last match against QPR, didn't he? Likes to play not necessarily as that central striker, but in off the left-hand side. And if we're going to put anyone into that top category that we're ranking on today's video, I think that he's probably got the best chance of getting 14 plus. I think that West Brom will score a lot of goals as the season goes on. He's going to get a lot of minutes as well. And if that brace really sort of kicks him into life in his West Brom career, then he's definitely got it in him to get 14 plus. We've seen him do it in the past. Next then to Birmingham, Scott Hogan. In his previous 2 Championship seasons, he's scored 7 goals. Already got a couple for Birmingham so far this season. I think he probably falls into that 7 to 9 goal category again. Birmingham have got a few options up front now with, Djukovic still there, Deeney coming in as well. But I think that Scott Hogan will be a constant in that side. He'll be a good partner for either of them to sort of make those runs in behind. His finishing can be a little bit erratic at times, I think it's fair to say, but yeah, I think around 7 to 9 is probably fair for him. Next up then to Blackburn Rovers, Sam Gallagher. Last season scored 8 goals in the Championship for Blackburn, already has I think 3 so far this season in the Championship. For Gallagher, I'm between 7 and 9 and 10 and 13. If you watched part 1, I fancy Ben Brereton to be in the sort of high teens in terms of goals for Blackburn this season, but where do I see Gallagher being? He is a bit of a funny one really, because he can be quite hot and cold throughout the season, plays a lot of his football in off the right hand side as well, always seems to have a great game against Preston as well, so I'm sure he'll get a couple of goals against us as the season goes on. I mean, I think Blackburn have it in them to score like 2 or 3 goals in a few of their home matches this season, so he could chip in with a few goals in them sort of matches. So I could see him going a couple better than he did last time around. I could see him getting into double figures, but yeah, between those two categories for him. After that we go to Blackpool's Shane Lavery. Now I think that most of us thought that Jerry H would be Blackpool's main man going forward coming into this season, but that's certainly not been the case so far, and it has been Lavery who really has been the main man for them going forward. 3 goals already this season. If you watched yesterday's Championship Roundup video, you'll have seen how impressed I was by the goal he scored against Barnsley. Great bit of movement and a really nice finish at a tight angle. I think it's probably likely that he ends up as Blackpool's top scorer this season, and although Blackpool haven't scored the most so far this season, 10 to 13 goals for him wouldn't surprise me with how well he's actually started the season. 3 goals to his name already. Next then for Bournemouth's Jamal Lowe. Now it'll be interesting to know where he actually ends up getting used. Obviously we've not seen much of him in the Bournemouth shirt so far. He's had 3 sub appearances and he played the majority of minutes last season obviously for Swansea, where he ended up scoring I think 14 goals in the league. He can either play as a winger or as that central striker, and wherever I place him on this list really depends on the amount of minutes he gets, to be honest with you. Obviously that forward 3 that Bournemouth have got going for them at the moment is working really well, so he might find it a little bit tough to properly break through. 4 to 6 goals wouldn't surprise me. That's not a knock on him as a player. I just don't think he'll play as much this season as he did last season for Swansea. I think he'll be a bit more of an impact player coming in from the bench. If he has a good season, 7 to 9, but yeah, around them two I think I wouldn't be surprised with for Lowe. Next up then for Nahki Wells. Now he did get into double figures last season for Bristol City in what was a pretty inconsistent season by his standards, I think it's fair to say. Obviously so far this season the majority of his minutes have come from the bench, with Chris Martin and Vyman being the sort of preferred 2 up front so far this season. He will chip in with goals though, particularly coming off the bench and things like that. I'll throw him into, I think the 7 to 9 goal category will be fair for where probably Nahki Wells is at this point in time in his Bristol City career. After that we go for Cardiff's James Collins. He has got into double figures in his previous 2 seasons at this level with Luton, but his role is a little bit different in this Cardiff squad. Obviously that number 9 spot has been sort of rotated actually so far this season between him and Kiefer Moore. He's probably had more minutes than they actually expected him to get so far this season. He's yet to score for them in the league. 4 to 6 wouldn't surprise me for Collins this season. Once again, he's another one similar to Lowe. Depends on game time and the sort of role he ends up playing for Cardiff this season. A good season for him would be 7 to 9. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's around that probably 4 to 6 mark for him. Next up then for Coventry's Martin Waghorn. Now all the plaudits, and rightly so for Coventry so far this season, have mainly been about Victor Gyökeres, who's been absolutely lighting it up so far. But Waghorn and O'Hare have done their sort of bit so far. It's a little bit different to Gyökeres, who's sort of like the finisher, who's, you know, ending off all these moves and things like that. And while Waghorn doesn't necessarily have that clinical ability in and around the box that he probably had a few years ago at this level, he does do a lot of running off the ball. He creates space for other people as well, and he's another one similar to Shawnee Maguire at North End, who I wouldn't be at all surprised to see end the season with more assists than he ends with goals. He will still chip in with goals though, you know, he'll score a free kick or something like that every once in a while, won't he? And between these two for Waghorn really, I think I'll go... My head's saying 4 to 6 for Waghorn this season. If he does manage to, you know, properly recapture that form in front of goal, then he probably ends with 7 to 9. But I mean, to level it up and to make it look nice, I'll put him in there in the 7 to 9 mark. But yeah, 4 to 6 wouldn't really surprise me for Waghorn. I'm really between there. I'm between them two for him, really. Coventry fans, how many goals do you realistically see Waghorn scoring this season? And then last of all, for Derby County's Sam Baldock. Now, when it comes to ranking Derby players with stuff like that, this at the moment is difficult because we don't know what their full situation will be, you know, come January, who are the players who are actually still going to be there come the end of this season, now that they have gone into administration. He has got off the mark for them though so far this season, and with Colin Kazim-Richards being injured at the moment, obviously he himself has also had his fair share of injuries, hasn't he? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and I'll go 4 to 6 for Sam Baldock, but I mean, yeah, he could be absolutely anywhere depending on how much he ends up playing and if he's still at Derby come the end of the season. There we have it though, guys. As you can see on screen now, those are my rankings for Championship strikers, for how many goals I realistically see them all scoring this season. Like I said before, if you've not seen part 1, make sure to go ahead and check that out. This was part 2 where we were ranking some of the other Championship strikers. Who do you think I've got in the correct position here, and who do you think I'm way off with? Let me know down below, and if there are any other tier lists that you'd like to see over the next few weeks, make sure to get your suggestions in down below. But yeah, that's what I'm going with for today's video. But guys, there we have it. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's video. As always, if you did go in to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Make sure to check out all the links in the description down below. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.